Good morning. How many here are winners so far? Of the three who raised their hand, how many are lying? I see. I got to say that because we have a caller school in Las Vegas every year, and some of you I know have been there, and that's our opening question every morning, what I tell you. Anyhow, welcome this morning. Our subject is obviously a very important one, keeping fun in mainstream, and I suspect what we interpret that as how to keep fun in your beginner class, not necessarily in the mainstream program. All the handouts and all the information that we've been given about this is to cover beginner classes as well as the mainstream program. And let's talk about beginner class just a little bit. It is both Jerry and my intention, after giving you some of our ideas, to pump you guys to get as much information as we can from you, guys and gals, to share with the rest of the group what your experiences have been, to put the program in the proper frame of reference. It seems a little strange to me to have to ask, keeping the fun in mainstream as though there were any other purpose for our being here, That implies that there is a lot of mainstream out there, a lot of beginner program out there that is not fun. And I don't know of anyone who wants to do that intentionally. On the other hand, we frequently find ourselves, do we not? And we have to ask ourselves very honestly, each of us, ask ourselves, do we have in our programs areas, or do we encourage a program that at some point in time ceases to be fun, ceases to be enjoyable, ceases to be a proper kind of recreation for the dancers for whom we are calling? Would you not agree that there's a pattern in almost every beginner class that we deal with? When the dancer first comes into the program, at point zero, he has never danced before, he and his partner are totally unaware. They have some vague idea what it's all about, but their buddies down the street have twisted their arm and brought them down this particular night. And at that point, we know what our goal is. And the only thing that we are concerned with as callers is to keep those people entertained, is to convince them that square dancing is the greatest thing that happens in sliced bread. Our job is to get those people so enthused and so wrapped up in square dancing and to entertain them, to allow them to enjoy themselves to such a high degree that they will come back next Tuesday. Isn't that true? That's what we do. And we work on that very, very strongly for a certain period of time. And our job is to keep them coming back. And we do that in only one way, is to make square dancing a recreation that they feel that they have experienced a great deal of enjoyment from. That happens in the very early part of the class. We then get caught up, all of us, do we not, in the nuts and bolts of converting these people into square dancers. We have non-square dancers. We're going to make square dancers out of them. It's a process I refer to as deflowering the virgins. A little humor there. But isn't what we do then? We seek to make these people square dancers and to convert them from non-square dancers who we've now promised we're going to give you a great time, and we're going to make them into square dancers and hold out the promise that square dancing is fantastic. It's the greatest amount of fun that there ever was. But now we have to work at that. And the minute we say we have to work at that, we start having a different frame of reference. A certain amount of the fun, whatever that means to any of us, is starting to leave the scene. And then typically what happens, we get to a point in the class, and I don't know how long your classes are, maybe we should talk about that a little bit, but we get to a point in class when we take a look at the checklist we've been working on and we take a look at how long we still have. Let's say we're working a 35 or a 45 or a 55 week program. Wherever we are, we take a look at the list and say, well, let's say it's a 42-week class, as CALLERLAB recommends, and about the 30th week or so, we look and say, where are we now? What do we still have to do? When we look at the list, we've done all those, but we still have to do all these. My goodness, I've only got 10 weeks, and then what happens? Then we start pouring it on, don't we? Our goal is no longer to keep the fun in square dancing, but our goal is to cover that silly piece of paper, to get through that list. And we start putting a pressure on our dancers. And that's when the fun really starts to leave. The goal that we have set for ourselves. And we're the ones who are responsible, guys. I understand all the rules, all the amount of pressure that we get, but we are the ones who at that point start thinking along different lines. Now, I'm sure this doesn't happen in every case, and I'm sure that there are many, many solutions out there, and we want to hear them from you. But what typically happens then is we start getting some of this pressure. The pressure continues if those who have remained throughout that onslaught at that point are given a diploma and brought into a club. In many, many cases, or at least that's the complaints we hear, the dancers come into the program, into the mainstream program, underprepared. They really aren't ready. We've ticked off some checklists, some marks on our checklist, and we bring the dancers into the program. They've been exposed to Appeal the Top. We've shown them maybe twice a Fan the Top, but they really can't dance it yet. Then we bring them into the club. We have experienced dancers in the club, and we have to also cater to them, and we start splitting that difference between the two. Very, very tough process, very difficult process, and that also detracts and takes away from the fun in the square dancing for the average dancer. Now, these are problems that I'm sure you have all experienced. If not yourself, you've seen around you in your own area, possibly other callers who have had that problem, but I rather suspect that most of us have had that problem. The question then arises, what can we do about that? How can we prevent that? How can we keep the fun in square dancing? All of us do that in a different way. Just as in the early stages, I would think, of our beginner classes, when our sole goal, when our primary purpose, the bullseye we were really trying to hit, at that point was to entertain the dancers and keep them coming back. We all succeed in that. You wouldn't be here if you didn't have a high degree of skill in that very important category. And all of us do that differently. We are all, I'm sure, constantly on the lookout. We're all aware to continue research in how to make that happen. And when we find a new gimmick or a new idea, we pick it up, we capture it, we make it part of our own process and program. But because we are confronted with that problem of how to get as much material to our dancers to deflower the virgin as quickly as possible, we then lose sight of that particular goal. Each one of us in our own way has the ability to retain and sustain the fun in the program. What we have to fight is time. The thing I would urge us all to seek to do is to think about keeping fun in square dancing. And I do it, and I suspect most of you do, in a variety of ways. One of the first and foremost things to keep in the forefront of our minds is that square dancing is, first and foremost, dancing. Capital D, dancing. We move to music. There's a sensuous pleasure in responding to the rhythm and in performing the dance actions involved. That is fun. That's pleasurable. And our people enjoy that. And to keep as much of that as you possibly can, be aware at all times the goal is not to teach them a new move, or not to teach them how to do a relay the deuce, or not to teach them how to add another merit badge to their merit badge sash, but rather to allow them to dance, to take part in a dance activity. Keep that in the forefront. That's a goal. That's an important concept. And I understand that, and no one is more aware of the puzzle-solving nature of our activity, and I love that aspect of it. That's a very important part. And typically one of the sacrifices we have to make when we get to puzzle is we sacrifice some of the dance aspects. Check your line, check your wave. Do you see your hourglass? Do you see your diamond? Every time you stop and do that, we stop the flow. There is an interruption of that. And a certain amount of that is necessary, and the dancers appreciate that kind of help. But we should always bear constantly in mind that whenever we do that, we are compromising somehow with perfection. Jim Mayo has indicated in one of his books, and I've repeated it many, many times, that in square dance calling, we are always engaged in seeking to find some acceptable compromise to perfection, implying that we cannot be perfect all the time. There are notable exceptions. At this table, for example. But we seek to try to make those, whenever you do make some compromise, tick it off in your computer up here. Keep tabs of it. That if you have lost a certain amount, and give yourself a limit. I'll go so far, but no further. Keep the dance in the activity. That's part of the fun. Allow the dancers to experience the pleasurable sensation of moving to music, of dancing. Secondly, to provide comfortable dancing, smooth flowing choreography. Give them commands that we are sure they know, that they have no problem with. I'm not saying eliminate challenge. I like challenge in square dancing. I enjoy the puzzle-solving aspect of it. But we should always be aware again also of the smooth nature of square dance choreography, and to keep that as smooth as possible. Smooth dancing involves a number of aspects. Timing certainly is critical to smoothness. The nature of the choreography itself, the way each command blends into the other, some blend better than others, that contributes to it. And there's also a sensation of, again, moving to music that contributes to a feeling of smoothness. And I think I can demonstrate that best in a very easy analysis. Would you not agree that there is a difference in the feeling when you dance a grand square, in a perfectly phrased 32-beat phrase of music? If you start on beat 1 of that phrase and end on beat 32 of that phrase, as opposed to starting on beat 8 of the phrase and going through into the first 8 of the next one. We do it, and we all do it from time to time, but wouldn't you agree that there's a greater feeling of dance, a greater feeling of smoothness, if the music and the action of the dance correspond? Well, that's a way to keep fun in square dancing. We are all, to some large extent, entertainers. We are all, to a large extent, performers. We have much in common, how do I put this delicately, with some of the people we saw at the show last night. I got to tell you, this is a true story. You saw the final act, that fantastic guy on the tightrope there, on the trapeze last night, on the marvelous performance. And when he did his final leap where he was really going to jump out into the audience, Jim Mayo turned to me and he said, "Yeah, but can he sing just because?" Well, this is the kind of thing, guys, that can keep fun in square dancing. If you keep the people laughing, if you keep a smile on their face, if you can keep some kind of... And see, I can't give you... I can tell you what I do, but that doesn't mean you can do it. I do it a lot by the kind of personality I have, my mic presence. And I look to get as much of that as I can. Each of us, I think, has to do that in our way, and we all do. We are all capable of that, because we demonstrate that in the first 10 weeks of every beginner class we teach. We have that capability. If there is no fun in the mainstream program, we are the ones who are at fault. We are the ones who are creating the problem. We are the ones and we're the only ones who can solve it. One final thing. There is a pressure that the dancer feels the moment you begin overloading him or letting him feel through your own nervousness or your own lack of confidence in what they're able to do and what you're able to do for them. If you seek to give them too much, or if you start rushing things, if you start going through this list that you have on your table when you're calling because this is what the list says and that's what the club is dancing and I got to rush them into that as fast as I can. That pressure takes away most of the fun in square dancing. Square dancing then indeed becomes work. It becomes a have to rather than I want to. It becomes an obligation. We feel the obligation because we have a list we want to conform to, and the dancers feel an obligation because we are putting pressure on them and they are somehow not being able to make it. And they feel at first a little puzzled by this because early on they had no problem at all. Boy, when I was teaching right and left throughs and ladies' chains, when he was teaching that to me, I had no problem. Why all of a sudden now am I having difficulty? Think about that. That's a very, very important thing. There are all kinds of gimmicks that have been published, all kinds of little stunts that have been published in a variety of sources, including some note services whose names I won't mention. What I'm saying there, guys, is a lot of the material for keeping the fun in square dancing is available. No one's holding it back. Some of us give it away, some of us sell it. But it's there. And even those who sell it, it's at a very reasonable price if you consider No. I'll let you know when I'm being facetious, I'll let you know when I'm being serious, guys. In terms of what we get for that, in terms of the ability to entertain our dancers and to keep the fun in square dancing in each of our own programs, it is really very, very cheap. The magazines that we read, the note services that are available, the books that are available, there's a lot of literature that has been done. A lot of this happens at callers' meetings. A lot of this happens in the bull sessions that you have with other callers. You go to a dance, by golly. You know, that's one of the best sources for fun material. Go to someone else's dance and steal. Research. That's exactly right. You know. Let me give you a little. I'm rambling now a little bit. One of the things that I do when I go to a dance, I don't go to as many dances as I'd like to because of the schedule, and we all have that problem, I'm sure. But when I go to a dance, I dance every tip, and I put a little tape recorder in my pocket, and I talk to myself as I'm dancing. When Jerry's calling, he calls something I don't like or I don't think is any good. I tell myself, I say, tape, listen to that again. It's terrible. Don't you ever do that, right? On the other hand, if he calls something that I do like, I say, oh boy, did you see that tape? Wasn't that great? Boy, you're going to do that next dance, aren't you? Watch that. Because I'm experiencing the impact of that material as a dancer, as my dancers would experience it, and if it entertains me, I'm telling myself what my actual response was. I do one further thing. When I find that Jerry does something that is not all that sharp, right? Which is frequently, as a matter of fact. But when I find that, before I talk to my tape, I look around to see what the rest of the floor is doing. And if it turns out that I didn't like what everyone else did, I tell my tape that. I don't understand some of those things sometimes like that, but I can't refute the fact that the rest of the floor out there is enjoying. He's done something. He's found something that I have not yet perceived, and then I really go back and look at that because I can't dispute the fact that the rest of the floor was great, and Jerry got a big hand when it was all over. I don't understand any of that, but there it is. Well, that's the research part of it. That's where the fun comes from. I suspect a lot of you came here looking for, maybe Jerry's going to do this, but looking for the panel to provide you with all kinds of little gimmicks and ideas, and you do this, you do little cookbook recipes. Do A plus B plus C, and you're going to get fun. Well, to a certain extent, we're doing that. But what I'm saying is you have to do that yourself. It's there. And I'm sure if we went around the room, as I'd like to in a moment or two, we're going to get some of those. And with that, let me turn it over to Jerry.
Bill has really covered most of the areas that we sort of wanted to open up and start you thinking about. One thing that I think is important to us as callers is to get yourself excited. When you're going to have a good time, you're going to relate that same feeling to your people. I find that in all of my teaching areas, not only in my mainstream, but all of my teaching areas, when I have given the people and have worked them hard perhaps, at the end of that workout, we got to have a little fun with it too. And there's where the singing calls are a great advantage for you. You can design that singing call to use the material that you just finished teaching with. From the first circle to the left, circle to the right, you can design your singing call. It also affords you the opportunity to filter through in some of the new singing calls that are available. You can fit a figure to it, use that music, and then adapt that same singing call right on up the line. But it's good training and good usage for you. It gets you excited because it's a new piece of material for you, along with the dances. Pretty soon, man, I'm out there, I'm doing nothing but circle left, everybody go forward and back, and working with my dancers with maybe the first lesson, the first night, the first lesson before we break. I put a singing call on, and then I'm hallelujah and getting the excitement in there for myself, because if I'm not excited, if I'm doing the same thing I've done over and over for the last 27 years, pretty soon I'm going, oh, then we're going to do a circle to the left. Now, let's say, join your hands. If you're very unemotional about it yourself, the people aren't going to be excited. The fun's not going to be there. You can add that with everything you teach. You can end it with a very easy little singing call. Keep it easy. Don't try to figure out a way that's going to be difficult for them to do. Of course, the singing call is the easiest part of their dancing. Make it easy enough so that it does dance, so that they can put that flow in it, and they can let that piece of music work for them in time and form. And I think those are little things that I try to use with my teaching and keeping the fun in it. And it works right on up the ladder with most everything you do. We also swap our beginners around in our areas. In other words, I might have those people one night a week. I try to find out all the other guys that have classes going at the same time. We're all essentially starting at the same time. We're all essentially close to the same place on the beginners list. And we try to keep a fairly close communication. It gives the dancers then the opportunity to hear somebody else do the same thing that you did, only a little different way, and he adds a little more excitement to it. By the time you get them back the next time around, maybe they've gone to 2 more lessons. They've been over the same thing. The mileage aspect of it is great. They have added that mileage to it. And if you're in a situation where you have other callers that you can suggest the dancers go to, if they can work it into their schedules, then that's to their advantage, also to your advantage. Makes your job easier. I think that's probably, Bill, like I say, I've covered most everything. We would like to open it up to any...
Let me add a couple things.
Okay, Bill would like to add another thing or two. When he was telling you about talking to his tape, it just crossed my mind. I wonder what the rest of the people are doing while Bill is standing there saying, hello, tape. How are you? This is really good. They're probably all looking at Bill like, boy, this boy is strange.
As a matter of fact, they do, I'm sitting there mumbling to myself. And,
Jerry, have you ever danced with him?
There's a phenomenon. Jerry made a couple of comments that brought this to my mind, that I'm sure we in Northern California don't have a patent on, and it must occur elsewhere. But I know there are many areas where this does not occur, and it seems to me this is a very, very good process to sustain fun in mainstream and at the beginner level. We have a thing in Northern California, a phenomenon called the beginner hoedown. And let me outline the process, how it works back home. The beginner season, typically, as it is in most parts of the square dance world, is from sometime early fall till sometime late spring, September-ish to maybe May, June. For September beginners who start in September, Starting about mid-November, end of November, but no later than early December. All our classes are middle of the week, but starting at late November, early December, every Saturday night through the season from then on until about a month or so prior to their final graduation, there are a number available to the dancers, a number of beginner hoedowns. The beginner hoedown is a phenomenon whereby sometimes they're club sponsored, sometimes they're sponsored by individual callers who get together and say, hey, why don't you and I put on a dance this Saturday night, and we'll put an ad in the local paper, and we'll encourage all the beginners in town to come to this dance. And usually what happens is his beginners come and my beginners come and maybe a few hangers on, but that's about it. But the two of us then have a nice dance, and the focus of that dance, the bullseye we're shooting for at that dance, is not another workshop night, another class session where we're going to teach you more stuff, but rather this is the place that you're going to practice what you've been learning. And those beginner dances, week to week to week to week, the level increases as the capability of the beginners increase. And it's a very, very effective and a very, very good way to introduce the dancers very early to the concept of they can now dance. Usually in a beginner class, they do, of course, but we don't tell them, or we don't give them the impression or the feeling that they are being allowed to practice what they've learned till after they've gone through the whole program, and the fun starts once you're in a square dancer. See? We give them an opportunity then week by week by week of doing this. If you haven't got something like this going in your area, I would urge you and encourage you to think about that. It's a very, very valuable system. In our town, in our area, at any Saturday night there are a dozen throughout all Northern California, beginner hoedowns within a 50-mile drive of just about everybody. And we find it to be a very effective thing. One other thing. Then we'll take some questions. I didn't want to imply in my earlier presentation that challenging choreography at any level, whether it's at the beginner level or at mainstream level or any level, is not also, in a very real sense, fun. It is fun. That's also part of the fun of square dancing. What I'm trying to avoid is pressure. We frequently hear the comment directed at dancers at the higher levels by people who don't dance the higher levels, and they look at some of those dancers and they say, they're not having any fun. There's nobody smiling out there. They're just very serious and going through all those paces, and they're really, like it's very grim. Well, did you ever watch a chess match? There's these two guys sitting there for an hour like that, right? Having the time of their life. They really are enjoying that. I submit to you that a certain aspect of square dancing today covers that. That's fun in square dancing. You got to keep that balance. Just because we're not smiling and laughing and falling all over ourselves and giggling does not necessarily mean that we are not enjoying what we're doing. A part of that is definitely there. You do have to keep a certain amount of choreographic interest in your program, and that is also interpreted as fun. So I just wanted to make that point. I think we're ready for some questions or comments from anybody. Yes, sir. Would you come on up and talk to the microphone, please, so the tape can preserve this for posterity?
Share something I stumbled on with the beginners class this year and keeping it fun. In keeping it fun in lessons, I imagine all of us that have taught from time to time with the number of figures that we have to teach in our lessons, we get these groans from time to time every time you bring up a new figure. And we've all experienced that. Well, tonight we're going to have a spin the top. We all hear that. Well, I thought I'd turn this around. It's positive and negative and that. And I just started the class with the idea that you're going to teach I'm going to be teaching a lot of figures. That this is going to be tough for some of you, easy for others. But what we want to do is anytime you hear me say that we're going to teach a new figure, I'd like to really hear some elation coming from the group out there. And this started the first night. And now anytime I get ready to teach a new figure, everybody just claps and yells and everything. You'd be surprised at that point that the area is there, they're receptive, they have a positive note, and it really works quite good.
That was Bob Parrish at Bellingham, Washington. You still there? Attaboy. Can I move to your town? Along that line, you know, the caller's attitude has a lot to do with that. We've all had the experience of seeing a caller who gets up on the microphone in a workshop environment and says, well, here's the latest thing CALLERLAB wants us to do. Let's see how this silly thing works. And if he doesn't use those words, you imply that from his attitude, don't you? We can tell. And what does that do to the dancers? Don't they get the feeling, well, why bother? You know, if you're not enthusiastic, even if it means occasionally lying, you know. Classic case in point, I hate with a passion the move swap around. And, well, there was a time in the Plus program when it was important for us to teach swap around because it was on the silly list and everybody was calling it. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I'd take that back. But it was on the list, and everyone was calling it, and you indeed, if you went to an open dance, if you wanted to train your dancers adequately so they can handle themselves properly at an open dance, you had to teach swap around. Well, I didn't like it, and so I lied. Hey, gang, this is a marvelous thing for swap around. This is a great move. We can have some fun with it. You know, as a matter of fact, I made the butt of the problem in the teach. I put the responsibility, the onus of a proper execution of the swap around on the ladies. As I'm sure most of you know, the problem with the swap around is that usually the bow, the man in the bow's position has a forward momentum and wants to go forward, but the action requires him to fold into the adjacent position. He doesn't want to do that, and we tend not to. A dive through into a swap around, he's going to go right past that lady, right? So I say, ladies, you don't want him to do that. And the thing that you want to do to prevent him, the minute you hear swap around, hold up your finger like so and tell him that's where he has to go. Don't let him pass you, right? And be sure and use this finger. Well, swap around then became, for me, a fun thing. It was a gimmick thing. It was something that they got some pleasure out of it, and we never danced it again very much after that in my sessions. But I guess that's part of the way. We had a hand back here. Come on up and introduce yourself.
Bob Furman, Kirkwood, Missouri, which is a suburb of St. Louis. The biggest problem with having new dancers, or beginners if you want to call it, having fun is that, as the gentleman said before, and I think Bill mentioned it, we come up and we say, oh, you know, we're going to learn this tonight, and everybody goes, all right, that's fine. But when I teach a new movement, until I've used it directionally 3 to 4 times, I do not put a name to it. They don't even know what they're doing. Some of the angels in the class say, yeah, I remember doing that at one time. But then, along with it, if we're working with something that is a new experimental, or you're reviewing something in mainstream from different positions, I like to get the dancers involved, just like this gentleman back here was talking about. And after they get through, I'd give them, did you make it? And they'll give, yay, or you get a no, But get the dancers involved as you're going along, and you'll find that they have more fun too, as long as you project that amount of enthusiasm through your voice. You must have the enthusiasm to get them to have the enthusiasm. Without enthusiasm, you're just calling figures. You're not really doing anything. You're making noise with your voice, and you're moving people around, as Bill said, chess match. You got to have the enthusiasm in there. Maybe use something not necessarily from a standard position, but play with it. Take some of the things that later on I was going to go to a session calling keeping mainstream interesting, because we've taken a lot of the mainstream movements and just use them from different positions. taking mainstream movements and, for instance, going into a plus movement of diamonds, which you don't even have to tell them you're using diamonds. Just use the different mainstream things and move them through diamonds. Very, very easy. So just keep it fun and interesting by doing those things rather than going into, you don't have to go into the quality selections or the plus list. I have people that I've taught that I say, okay, I'm going to do a basic tip. And some of them say, oh, I ain't getting up and dancing that. That's too hard. I'd rather dance plus two. But just take some of those things and keep them fun and let them have fun and enjoy themselves. And that's the big thing in keeping the mainstream fun and interesting.
Thank you. Do me a favor, would you? I'm going to bring my hand down. When I bring my hand down, that means everybody claps. And we measure just one clap, and we measure the success in that we all do it together. I want to count three, and on the count of three, I'll bring my hand down. I want that clap. 1, 2. Would you take care of that guy, please? I notice this is the witching hour this morning, and some of us are starting to fall asleep a little bit. And whenever I bring my hand down on the count of three, we all do that and wake up our neighbor, okay? Now the question back there. Sir? Come on up, sure. Tell us who you are.
I'll wait till I get to the mic. It's hell being short, you know. I'm Charlie Muff from Mar Vista, California, and I made a couple of notes so that I don't ramble on things that I do and that I've seen done in classes to make them fun. Very quickly, I'll try to get through my whole page of things here, but I'll make it very quick. Number one, I encourage, you may have different situations because you may have club-run clubs or caller-run clubs or classes. We have primarily in California, at least Southern California, club-operated classes. So I encourage the dancers whenever possible, and get the club to encourage the dancers to visit other classes on special occasions like halfway dances, this type of thing, and that helps too. If you're afraid of losing the class, that means that you're doing something wrong and you're not giving them the enjoyment and the guidance that they need. So I don't worry about that. I just send them out, say, go try this class, go to their halfway dance, have fun. Okay, another thing is club involvement with the class. I have encountered situations whereby the club that I'm working for will not support the class. I mean, like I'm teaching one class now, and the last 3 weeks we've had an average of 3 club members present at the class. And I think most of you know what that'll do. So you need to encourage the club to get the club people out. If they're not going to do that, tell them to forget having a class, because it just doesn't work. You lose people, and they don't have fun. If the club doesn't work with the people, if you don't talk to the people, nobody's going to have fun. Using your personality, as both of you said, is very important in talking to the people, talking to the class members. I've talked to a lot of you just in the hallway here, and I think for the most part, callers are pretty funny people. Take it any way you want. I don't care. Anyway, yes. So, oh, I'm sorry, I took your spot there, Bill. So use that when you're working with your class. You're teaching them, and you don't want to act silly with them to the point they're going to say, well, what's this guy, weird or something? But you want them to have fun. So talk with them like you would talk to somebody else. They're people, just like we are. And they're going to be dancers, and there's no reason that you should treat them any differently as far as having fun with them, talking to them. You may get to know somebody in the class. Pick on them a little bit, not much, a little bit. You might call them by name if you know they can handle it. Or if a friend of yours is there, another caller, pick on them. Poke fun at yourself. Always remembering to keep your dignity up and your level of credibility up. Never degrade yourself, but poke fun at yourself. I use it. Anybody know what this is? I know a few of you do. That came... One more cup. No, that means dumb shit. And if the caller makes a mistake, and I teach the class that occasionally, I tell them about that. If I goof somewhere or another, I have them I'm not paying attention. I have them do a right and left through half sachet, and I haven't taught them that or some silly thing. Nobody does that, I know. But I give them this. I tell them what this is, and that's their way to poke fun back at the caller. And once in a while I'll see this, and I'll go, what did I do now? Type thing. Somebody else. Usually they're wrong, but anyway. But have fun with them. And I, as Bill mentioned, I love to dance teach. If there's any way that I can teach a figure by dancing it, I do it. I don't like to stop them if I don't have to and explain for 15 minutes how to teach a figure. For instance, the figure right and left through. You've probably already taught them courtesy turn. You've taught them right and left grand, so they know what a pull by is, or the process of pulling by. Shake hands, step forward, drop hands, step through. So you have them pass through, courtesy turn. Pass through, courtesy turn, shake right hands, pull by, courtesy turn, and you've taught them right and left through. And you don't have to stop them to explain all that. You might stop them for a moment and say, you just did a right and left through. Aren't you proud? And then they say, yeah, that's great. Singing calls. You mentioned that. I use that from the very first night. I use singing calls. Once I get them out of the initial line to where they're circling left, circling right, do right and left grands, do a couple of things. I do a do-sa-do and maybe a pass-through. You turn back. And then I put them in squares or mini squares, squares. And I do singing calls right off the bat. Very first night. The dancers love it. And you can use comments like, last week you couldn't even spell square dancer and now you are one. So this type of thing. And they're having fun. They're dancing. They're having a good time. And that's the most important thing. And don't ever forget to tell your dancers how well they're doing. That's so important to them. Because you're going to criticize them. You have to. You say, well, you did okay, but you have to remember to do this. And if you do that at all, you have to counter that with something positive. Anything that you say it's in the least bit negative, you have to come up with something positive, or you're going to kill them. Always tell them how well they're doing. Tell them when they're like halfway through, if they're one figure ahead of schedule that you had planned on maybe teaching them. You taught them an extra figure tonight, say, gee, you shouldn't have that for 2 more weeks, but I did it for you anyway. Something like that to give them confidence. And again, going back to using 2 couple squares to teach, you keep everybody dancing. And again, that's the most important thing, is to keep them dancing and having fun. That's it.
One, two.
I just want to let you know I'm awake. I'm Norm Graham from Palm Springs, California. Just to tell you about a little teaching aid that I used this year that I found very effective. I took a piece of cardboard that's about 3 feet by 2.5 feet, bent it in the middle, listed all the basics from, say, 1 to 35 on one side of it, and set it right up in the top in front of my stage. As we go through them, I check them off. And you'll be surprised how many times dancers will come up to you and say, this, spin the top. I didn't understand that. Because I have found that most of the time they have no idea what the name of the things they're doing. They need a visual as well as a hearing. They need a visual check. And they'll come up and they'll say, I didn't understand that. Or at the end of the night, when they see how we've checked off, I say, hey, gang, look what we accomplished tonight. And they not only see it, but they not only hear it, but they also see it. And I found it very effective.
I'll make a comment. Come on up. No, on the microphone. Come on up here and stand behind me. Sure you do. Oh, come on up here. Good Lord. One of the things that I would urge all of us to do is to stand behind me and put pressure on my back. Yes, sir. Oh, make bigger. I'll give you a half hour. Tape, I ain't going to tell you what he did. Well, can you imagine someone hearing that? Yes, ma'am. And it's worth it. I would urge you all to start collecting. Get a little resource book and start collecting and using all the little things, all the little gimmicks that you see and hear about, and go back into some of the old literature. I find some of the things, they're gimmicks, and like any other gimmick, they have a very short life. You do them once, and that's about as much as you can do, because the second time, it's no longer a novelty. Their primary value, their primary appeal to provide fun for dancers is their novelty value. But there are things like Vaughan Parrish's gimmick of calling backwards. You know, do an Alamantelf with your Ren trap, that's your partner, and go to your Ren rock for an Alamantelf, do a Tyrantelf grand, right? And meet your Ren trap with an Otsa it's a Do-Si-Do, and then Danamorph, that's a promenade. And you can box the Tang, and nips the pot, and rats through and sap through, right? Well, and you can do a whole tip of that kind of thing, and it gets them, you have to tell them what each one is as you do it, and they get the same kind of laugh we just had here now when you were able to figure out very quickly what a box the Tang was, or the head lady's Naich. I love that one, right? Or the head couple's deal to the tire, encircled to a Nile. Well, you get just that kind of laugh, okay? Well, and it's not hard to do. Practice it, and you do it one time. But with the kind of people you do that to, standard gimmick kind of thing, some of the old quadrilles are very, very fun to do. Dig those out. Some of you guys have been calling, how many guys here have been calling 20 years or more? 15. 5. All the rest of you don't bother. Some of you have been around for some time will remember a thing we used to do very, very often. It was as a gimmick. It's called Siamese squares. Remember those? Well, you put your arm around the same. You get 8 people. You get 16 people in the square. The heads join the heads, and the sides join the sides, and you have 2 boys together and 2 girls together in each position. Number 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they put an arm around each other's waist, and they have one. Each Siamese pair then has one free left hand, one free right hand, and you do some very simple choreography, right? Try an Alamanvar that way sometime, for example, and do a whole tip of that. It is a ball. It's a blast. One time, see? But when you start sensing that your program's getting a little heavy-handed, you get all this pressure, and you got to start latching this stuff onto them, or you've all noticed there are some nights, I think the moon is full, or Venus is in the 3rd house of Orpheus with, whatever's going on, nothing happens, right? Everything is disaster time, right? That's the time to have some of this in the arsenal, in the toolkit, and reach in there and dig it out and put that in instead. And don't worry that they didn't learn how to spin the top that night. They'll learn how to spin the top sooner or later. Sometimes sooner, sometimes later, but they will learn how. And you're missing the goal if we don't entertain them. Have that kind of stuff around. Your turn.
Almost forgot what I was going to say. Oh, thank you, Bill. Well, one of the things that I come up here for was I just wanted to ask a question, and the main thing is everything I think that is covered is fine is in our beginners group and teaching our new dancer. But what I'd like to ask these 2 gentlemen is what do we do with mainstream if we want to keep it within our club? What do you actually do in the mainstream after you've taught the dancer and you want them to dance 2 years in mainstream?
That's a good question.
Now, some of the points you just covered, but this is what I'd like personally. I go.
Jerry?
Some of the things that Bill just mentioned, the Siamese squares, are very effective. Your progressive squares, moving people clear around their floor, for instance, without having to actually teach them anything new. 2-couple squares was mentioned a little bit earlier. Have them square up, 2 couples. 80% of your mainstream is only involves one other couple anyway. It's good practice for them, and they'll get a kick out of it. But there again, 1 tip. You only use something like that. Don't overdo. But most of all, let them succeed. When they succeed, they build confidence. When they build confidence, their dancing abilities seem for some reason to increase just with the confidence that they get from success. So make sure that they succeed with whatever you try. Don't get into something and say, well, I wish I hadn't started this, and back off from it and forget it. Be prepared. Prepare yourself well enough so that you can make it succeed for them, and they'll have a good time in it.
Let me add one thing to that. Assuming that we are now properly, I assume what the nature of his question was, we have trained our dancers adequately, and now they are at the mainstream, and how do we keep our dancers interested then, or how do we keep the fun in square dancing at the mainstream? Keep it unpredictable. Let me give you a little test. Head couple square through, you with me? Swing through. Boys. The wise guys are all saying the things that you know are possible, but what do you know for a fact that 90% of all of us are going to say, right? Well, the minute that happens, we're introducing a degree of predictability into our choreography. Now, I don't say don't ever call swing through, boys run. We do that an awful lot. Be aware that we do it an awful lot, and that then begins to give us a degree of predictability. And what has kept square dancing fun all the way through up to that point is the fact we did not know what's coming next. Think about this, guys. There was a point in time when square dancing took a turn away from the basic folk dance activity. When square dancing really began to prosper, when it was discovered that it is also fun if we don't know what's coming next. Way, way back, all those who had their hands up for 20 years will bear this out, I'm sure. We used to do square dancing in memorized sequences. And we did it twice for the heads and twice for the sides. Remember that? And we learned a particular dance as we learn a round dance today. We always do that dance in that same way, and it was and I'm not saying that's not fun. It was discovered, however, somewhere along the line, that it is also fun if the dancers don't know what's coming next, if we keep it unpredictable. And all the way through in our lessons, all the way through our program, our training program, that unpredictability, and yet, as Jerry says, with the strong capability of allowing us to succeed, of responding to unpredictable situations successfully, has been what's made square dancing so much fun for us. You know, if you really analyze what we do, we had this debate in Miami with Jim Mayo and I. One of the things that really makes square dancing exciting, the thing that makes square dancing different, how we differ from anybody else, any other dance recreation, is that we do not know what's coming next, and we each in square dancing have to carry our share of the load as a team effort. It's a joint venture. And when all of us contribute our part, and we all do everything we have to do in cooperation as a team, and when the caller tells us we've succeeded, when he says "Our man left," that's what that big whoopee is all about. We made it. And that's a high. That really is a high, because we knew we weren't going to do it. We knew we weren't, and by golly, we did, and that caller let us do it. And did you ever hear dancers say that? Boy, he got me through stuff I had no business doing. Look what they just said. He got me through. That makes you look like, King Tut. That's marvelous. That's fantastic. Well, that's the high. That's where square dancing derives its pleasure, and it's that unpredictability. And there are thousands of ways to do that. Always keep them on edge. The minute they begin to second guess your choreography correctly, think about that. We had a hand up back here. I think she was first. Now I'll get you. Come on up here, sweetheart.
I have.
Tell us who you are.
I'm Dexter Solvey from Yakima, Washington. I help my husband call from time to time. But I can't help feeling that, how many of you remember the Pappy Shaw workshops? I'm sure a lot of you do. But he always said, keep it simple, keep it entertaining, and keep it fun. Now I want to go back to where we were using our new dancers and what we were doing. We always give out these little brochures to our new dancers when we first start so that they can check off what we've done at the end of the evening. And since we've been doing that, we've really held on to our dancers a lot longer. I don't know why. We've only been doing it about 2.5, 3 years now. But we've held on to every one of them this year. And we've had our largest, we're in a real little rural area in Ellensburg, Washington. And our largest class this year is 5 squares. And I really am impressed with these little books that the callers have put out to check these lists out. So I don't know if that'll help any of you other callers, but our dancers really like it. Yeah, the sets in order. We order them and we give them to our dancers. We don't sell them. A lot of the callers have sold them, I've noticed, but we give them to our dancers at the beginning of our lessons. And I was amazed this year how many of them every week bring these little booklets back and check these out at the end of our dance. It's really been impressing to us.
Everybody, 1, 2.
Ron Claridge from Gardnerville, Nevada. One of the things that I have done to keep interest in our groups, I call in a very small area where we have maybe 2 squares of beginners and maybe 2 squares in our regular club. And it's tough when you have that smaller group to keep interest going. And one of the things I have found, we call one night for each club. We have the beginner class and our regular club on the same night. It makes it tough on me because I call continuously through the night. Every other tip, one is beginner, one is intermediate. And I never stop all during the night. But I have found that it creates a lot of interest in the beginners because they have seen their regular dancers out there dancing. Teacup chain, they've seen them do load the boat, and they see them hoop and holler when they get through something like that. And by the time they have graduated, they're really eager to learn the newer things. They're eager to learn the experimentals and all the new moves, and it really makes a difference. Thank you.
I'm Stu Shacklett from Brandenburg, Kentucky, which is just south of Louisville a little ways. A couple of things that started stirring in my mind when Bill made some comments about keeping the dance interested. These things work for me. They might not work for you. But if you find the guy that's anticipator, you know he's going to do a swing through boys run, and he gets there before you do. I always change my call, like Bill mentions, or just a hesitation of not calling it, and then let him go ahead and do it and look at him, and then say, boys run. He knows he's been called. And I'm known as a dirty caller because I will change it if I see anyone anticipating. As soon as I see the first person start anticipating my command, and we all get in a rut. We use the same drills over and over again, and the dancers get to recognize these, and once they start recognizing and start doing it, hey, that's the time to either hesitate and let him know that you know that he's doing it before you're calling it, and then get back to some other variation. 2 little gimmicks I use. One I use for beginners, one I use for experienced dancers, and you might want to try them. They might work for you. I take Burleson's encyclopedia. Say, hey, gang, we're going to do something different tonight. Flip open the book, 1,372. Now, that figure goes like this, and I'll teach that figure to these folks, just walk them through it real quick. Then I'll start calling. When I got them in position, I say, 1,372. And, hey, they do it. No, they'll dance it. No, seriously, you don't have to call it a zigzag through or whatever. You give them a number. He's researching. Research. But it works, and like Bill says, you can't overdo this. Once in a while you can go back and do this, and the little gimmick works. And then on beginners, especially on a graduation night,
I take a little card and I take 8 numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I'll say number 1 is an Alaman left, number 2 is a grand right and left, and so on. 7 and 8 would be ladies chain right and left through. Well, I'll get the beginners up and tell them I'm going to reprogram them, show them how easy it is to learn what they've learned, and then I'll call it by numbers. But the other people are sitting around watching this and laughing, see? So when I get up later in a tip, when the rest of the people, experienced dancers on the floor with the new dancers, then I give them some of those numbers, 1s or 2s or 4s or whatever they are, and see how easy it is for them to do it. But it's a little thing that I work with, and people enjoy it. They have fun with it.
Thanks, I needed that. I'd like to state an alternative, another way of skinning the same cat, or maybe another window to look through to solve the same problem. When you have the anticipator, it is also possible, I feel, and as a matter of fact, I feel it's our responsibility as callers to recognize the places where the dancers do indeed anticipate. Swing through boys run is certainly one of them. Walk and dodge, partner trade. There are others like that. There are a number of very obvious, predictable places where the dancers are going to second guess you. You can indeed do what Stu suggests and catch them. If you do that, I urge you to do it very, very cautiously. As a dancer, I hate a gotcha caller. A gotcha is a right and left through and dive through and square through, 3 hands, there she is, split those 2, go round 1. And he waits until I've already committed, I'm halfway through the Alaman left before he says split those 2. Unfair, dirty tactics, dirty pool, guys. And very frankly, I don't think the dancers enjoy. They get a very uneasy kind of a laugh out of it, but it's uneasy because you did not allow them to succeed, and they feel shortchanged because really you have the edge. In the predictable areas, and for example, I'm very aware of this if I, as I frequently do, want to call swing through boys trade. If I know I'm going to do a boys trade, I know I can predict that a lot of them are going to want to run, so I give them that trade much more at least a beat before I would give the boys run, just to be sure that there's no question about what I want them to do, and I raise the intensity, the energy level in my voice. I alarm them. I alert them, not alarm, I alert them. Sorry, tape. You've been to my dance, I see. I alert them that this is going to be a little different, guys. And just with the tone of my voice. The voice, we do this in caller school, the voice is an enormously expressive instrument. It really is. I want you to do me a favor. First of all, okay, I want to be sure you're awake. I'm going to ask you now to close your eyes for just a brief second, and I want you just to listen to my voice. You can cheat, but you're going to miss out on something that's very interesting. I want you to close your eyes, and I'm going to show you how expressive the voice can be. With your eyes closed, can't you hear that there's now a smile in my voice? Can't you hear that smile? And can't you hear when that smile changes to a frown? I am not smiling any longer now, and you know that. Wake up. Everybody, thank you. The voice is an expressive instrument. You can get all kinds of things with your voice. You can get all kinds of expression into your voice. And you can even create excitement. This is also part of keeping fun. You can create excitement. If you do, as we all do from time to time, some dull routine that you research from somebody else's notes. If you do a routine like that and it just isn't going anywhere, try this sometime. Just increase the energy level and the intensity, the brilliance, if you will, of your delivery, and you can tell them it's time to be excited, guys, and just by telling them they will, you can go right and left through and dive through and square through, 3 hands, there she is, Alaman left. And all you did was chicken plucker, right? Simple little routine, but because you told them it's time to get excited, they go, wow, right? Because you've let them know this is excitement time, guys. They're not quite sure why, but the caller says so. I'm going to do it, right? Well, it keeps the fun in the activity. That's part of it. I would urge, and sometimes I'll do what Stu does, always with a caution though that you don't embarrass them. That they don't feel they've been had, they've been taken advantage of. We have some other questions. Yes, sir. Come on up, Carl. I happen to be keeping fun in class. I'm glad you mentioned that. I thought you'd never get to it. I happen to be, as many of you undoubtedly know, the world's best non-yodeler. There are some pretty good non-yodelers around, but I tell you, I am... Every place I go, people ask me not to yodel. I have a little singing call record. It was a yodeling record when it came out, and everybody, all the yodelers would do it. There are three kinds of unfair competition. Wouldn't you agree? You heard this one? Yeah? I won't say it. A talented 9-year-old kid. You know? Maybe not even talented. He sings sour, he's off pitch, they put him on a chair in a cowboy hat, and he sings terrible, and he's only 9 years old. How can you compete with that? How do you follow that, right? At a convention. Or a talented lady caller with cleavage. Tough, right? Huh? Doesn't even have to be talented, right? And the worst of all, of course, are yodelers. Yodelers are terrible. They're just unfair to us non-yodelers. Well, I happen to be the world's best non-yodeler, and when this yodeling singing call came out, I would tell the dancers, you've heard this done by all the yodelers, I love the tune, so I'm going to do it as a non-yodeling song, and whenever the yodel part came, I said, yodel, 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 that's it, yodel, yodel, yodel. Or just open my mouth and go... Well, now this is the kind of hammy showmanship kind of thing that all of us do in our own way, and that's exactly the kind of thing we're coming to, so I'm glad you mentioned that. I was making some other point, what was it? I'll pass the floor to the next question, please. Come on up. Oh, Carl. Yes, Carl was next. Thank you, Carl.
Hi, Jerry. I'm Carl Brandt from Fort Wayne, Indiana. The flood has receded, and we get out in pretty good shape. I'd like to share with you some of the things that I've learned, one especially in psychology by Dr. Murray Banks from out of New York, quite a psychologist. Some of the things that he feels that people want out of life, of course, is to live. And number two, they want to have a feeling of importance, and they want to be loved. And how can you put that into practice is a challenge to all of us. They'd also like to have a little change. And so you hear, too much of this and that on changing figures, but the people want some. Not too much, but they want some. In the feeling of importance, recently I gave the ring to my beauty back there, and we have in my senior citizens club on Wednesdays several pairs there that have been married the second time, and one couple just came back from Honolulu in Hawaii, and we plan to go there on our honeymoon. And so while we're circling left or right and that sort of thing, there's a chance to communicate with the people. And when they're doing that, of course, to the music, whether it be a singing call or what have you, I'll stretch it out and I'll say, Million Doyle, how was Hawaii? And they're getting recognized. And later on, and maybe the same type of circle left and right, we have the timer promenade. I'll say, Million Doyle, would you believe Joe and I are going to go to Hawaii? And the gang just gets a bang out of it. Along with the recognition, I give birthday cards, send them out to each individual in my class. I find out, I don't care whether they're born in odd 8 or 18 or 28. I ask them, well, just June the 8th, that's all I need. They'll tell me later on that it's very interesting that they've never received a card that has a written note on it. For instance, I'll say it's a pleasure and greetings to you on your birthday. It's a pleasure to see you on the dance floor. We love to have you out there, and you do have a wonderful personality. And they all do. They're all different, but they all have a personality and they want to be recognized, and just give them a little credit for it. When they do something good, as some of the others mentioned, I'll tell them right on the mic that, hey, gang, I'll have to give you an A on that one, and they all smile. If there's tension out there, I use the same old thing a lot of you do. Of course, I say anybody under 30 think you're sexy, promenade inside. And whammo, they all charge up. The whole set goes, once in a while. On a one-night stand, I like to use the old Virginia reel. Of course, in my single adults, I've had them for 19 years now, and they still love it. somewhere along the line, you do-si-do, right elbow and left elbow. But about the fourth time, you do two elbows any old style. And away they go, Or the tail end, you do a right elbow and a left-hand swing. And the hands are going around there, and they're giggling and having a lot of fun. So it's a lot of challenge to us to put that into practice of recognizing the people as you walk around the floor during the intermissions on class or even on the club night. Shake hands with the people. Or on the microphones. If a guy just came back from being sick, say, hey, glad to see you, Bill, out there. You're doing when they're promenading, that sort of thing. So it's a lot of fun. Some nights, since we had the boat problem up there and the flood, I said, anybody get out in the boat tonight to get here, and they all sort of hear. But it takes a little tension off of the situation at the time, Bill. Thank you.
Bart Bartholomew, Salt Lake. I just have a question for Jerry. You mentioned, and both of you, I think, mentioned you have the classes visit other classes. And I was just wondering, doesn't that increase the spread of abilities, which is already a problem? 20% go to those other dances, become very proficient. You still got the 20% in your class that is very unproficient. I'd like you to address that question, please.
Naturally, the more mileage that your dancers attain by moving from one caller to another during their class is to their advantage and also your advantage, but it also puts, as he mentioned, maybe some of the people that can't get to the other classes at a disadvantage. I don't feel that it does. I feel that there's now somebody out there that's a little bit stronger that can help maybe the other people that can only schedule one night. They bowl one night, they square dance, that's their night to square dance. They can't go 2-3 times a week. And you'll have other people that, if they can find 7, they're going to be to 7 of them. But I feel that it makes stronger dancers out of those people. It doesn't interfere. Of course, you have to gear your classes, your teaching progression to include those people. You can't run off and leave the ones that are slow learners. Nobody learns at the same pace, unfortunately. It would be nice if we could say, okay, I'm going to teach a square through tonight, and after I've shown that and they've done it 4 times, they'll all have it. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. Every individual learns at a different pace. I haven't found that it's been a problem. It's been to our advantage to encourage them to move from one class to another if they can work it in.
In a class situation where the dancer, and you certainly don't doctor the class situation to accommodate Charlie Hotshot, nor do you change the class learning pace to accommodate Charlie Leftfoot either. You find that middle ground. Well, in the middle ground, we find that if you're dancing once a week in lessons, you're going to learn at a comfortable rate. If it should happen that 20% or 30% are going out and dancing extra, I'm not so sure that they become better dancers as much as they become more enthusiastic dancers. These are the guys who are really, they're eager beaver. We've all seen that phenomenon, and I don't want to do anything to curb that. The name of this game is I want to do it. The minute they have to do it, like you have to get to +2, right? The minute you get a have to, the fun starts to leave. It's because I want to. Now, when they want to go to all these extra dances, I want to encourage that. Now, I don't accommodate that in my learning plan. I will custom tailor the learning plan to the collective learning ability of the group. As Jerry said, every class learns at a different rate of speed. Whatever that rate of speed is for that particular class, I will accommodate that. and the eager beavers are going to be certainly because they're doing more of it, finding it a little bit easier. They're not better dancers. They're just going to find it easier, right? I don't make any allowances for that. I allow the dancers to move at their own rate of speed collectively and encourage them all. See, the other thing that happens here is that frequently, if that 20% or 30% has gone out and had a good time, if they've enjoyed it, they come back to class the next Tuesday and say, "Boy, we went to so-and-so's dance and it was fantastic. He did that thing with put arm around each other's waist and we had our hand up. It was marvelous." Well, that's contagious. That's enthusiastic. You know, if we laugh a lot and we smile a lot, enthusiasm is a very contagious thing. You've all heard that record, that laughing record. There's nothing on it but the guy laughing, right? And you put it on for 30 seconds and you start to laugh. Sorry, tape, that's not what you think it is. Well, this kind of thing, keeping it light, is a part of that, you know. And does that answer your question? Good. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Come on up.
Torgy Thorbjornsen from Denver. One of the things that I do, so far as they were talking about going to other classes, I teach 3 classes for the last couple of years, and after the first 5 or 6 lessons, I've encouraged each of the members that if you're a paying member in one class, you can come to any of my other classes free. This is all coordinated with the clubs. This does help if they happen to have a meeting or something that they cannot go to. One lesson they say, "Well, what night are you in Parker? What night are you in Littleton?" They're all within a 10-mile radius of each other. So that's helped there. I'm sure you've all had the quote-quote click situation, be it in clubs or classes. And I try to watch that in classes. You always have the slow people. They're a little bit slow to get up, to square up, so invariably they're together. So I'll call a scatter promenade from time to time to get that broken up. First, the 4 ladies chain so they don't have their own partner. Then circle up 2. Now you'll still find the alert ones know what you're doing, so they're following each other very faithfully. So he says, turn around, circle up 4. They're right there with their buddies again. But you can get them out of that too, of course, with a pass through, and then circle up with the next 2, and pretty soon you've got them broke up. Then to add the variety, as they were saying, gimmick. When you have them in this 2s, say a wheel and deal, and a quarter more, and a quarter more. And of course, by then they've got a smile on their face, and then say dive through. Just a gimmick. Thank you.
We're going to have time for one more after this. I think you had your hand up, okay?
Don Hoff, Fresno, California. I understand there's a problem in some classes or in some clubs between the classes and the club not intermingling or not too friendly. We work it a little different in ours. We dance on Monday night. We're competing with Monday Night Football in our area. Every 4th Monday or the last Monday of each month is party night. The class ordinarily runs from 7 to 9. I cut the class off at 8:30, and everybody eats together, and the class brings the refreshments, and the club brings refreshments on a voluntary basis. There's always enough food for the dancers, and there's always enough dancers for the food. Everybody brings what they want to, and everybody eats together between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, and at 9 o'clock, they all come back, and they dance at the class level, right where they are. Now, there are a lot of young people with children, and they have babysitter problems, and they have to leave at 9 o'clock sharp. I promise them that I will not teach anything between 9 and 10, anything new. We may review the material. But it's a fun night. They look forward to it, and they love to eat the food, and they also enjoy the fellowship, and they get acquainted. And the class, of course, started in September, and the class was only about 3 months old, and everybody was all acquainted with each other, and they're intermingling, and you can't tell, except for the badge, whose class and whose club, because the old ones are mixing with the young ones, and it's a great idea. It works for us real well, and there's no distinction between the class and the club.
I'm Marg Weber from Victoria, BC. Actually, this gentleman just touched on what I was going to say. I'm a caller's partner, and I think one of our main things early in the thing is to get people to know people. And we try and do something to make people get to know one another. I think in the early stages, this is almost as important as the early basics. We have little fines that go on. We give them name tags. If they don't wear them, then the first one that loses it or doesn't wear it, that's the sheriff. This way people get to know one another. We find people going around trying to catch somebody that hasn't worn their badge to report to the sheriff. This way they're getting to know one another. We find that people come to square dancing a lot of the times because they don't know anybody. They've come to town and haven't any friends. And I think as well as teaching the basics properly and thoroughly and giving them fun in their dancing, also you have to teach them to be friends, because a lot of people have never learned to be friends or have never had the opportunity. Thanks, Bill.
We certainly thank you for coming by this morning, and we hope that maybe you've picked up a few ideas that will help you in your programs. And we're going to break now for coffee. I think it's probably outside where it was yesterday. I didn't look.